and still exciting. Number 34. This has got one of those. I'm still not. Again, I have to say it's a wine I'd quite like to spend a bit of time over, I have to say. But this is, I find the aromas hard to pinpoint. It reminds me of certain things, but I'm not quite sure what. There were times when it reminded me a bit of Merlot, then it didn't. Then it reminded me a bit of Syrah, then it didn't. The closest I've got is to the, I'm now veering towards, it reminds me a little bit of the south of France, Languedoc. That sort of territory is where it's placing me. And that's partly the aroma, but the main thing that's taking me there is the intensity of flavour, and again, that freshness, that acidity, the lift on the finish, which you get with the very best wines from Gobi, people like that in that part of France. That's what this reminds me of. It's fantastic. It's absolutely wonderful, and I would love to just spend time with that again, just to see how it changes. But that is of all the wines we've tasted this evening, that's the one that's most that just stays with me on the finish, that just lingers and just carries on and on and on. Really, really interesting wine, and I suspect, again, it comes across as a wine that isn't at its peak, that could, if it's tasting like that at 5 years old, then who knows where it could go in the next 5 years as well. It would be exciting to see. Very, very exciting wine. Second one of these, the Degrassi, it's intriguing to me because it's a different style to the other wines in the range that we've tried. The other wines in the range were, and I mean this in a positive light, but they're user-friendly. They're friendly wines in the sense that they're very pure, very bright, fruit-forward for the most part, easy drinking, very easy to understand, to enjoy, very easy to drink. And a little bit of international in their style. This one is not international in style. This one to me comes across to me as Italian in style. And it's not just because of the grape. It is the way it comes across to me. The acidity, that bitter cherry character to the fruit is distinctively Italian, which wasn't a character that I found in the other wines in the range. Now, I'm not saying this isn't as good as the other wines in the range. I think it is. I find it really interesting. I'd love, again, sit down and drink this. For commercial appeal, and I know you're going to tell me I'm wrong, but for commercial appeal, I'm not sure this is quite as easy a sell as the other wines in the range. There you go. That was my view.
I have experience with that wine. The last one you're talking about. Like a party, you're part of the party, and if you're not in the party, and if you're in the party, so we have half. Half of them went crazy, even international amount, like Americans, German, Italian, Serbian, Croatian, UK people. Half of them immediately they left the glass honestly, or they fell in love and put it even above all our reserves, which are very international, like you said, right, because this is interesting. And I can tell you about my experience in winter, even this winter, I had a deer sausage in a pan, which leaves a pretty amount of fat. And you can imagine that fat goes well with acidity. And what it left in the mouth, it was just a juicy feeling of red of the wine and of the meat, which is just let us eat more and let us drink more. And this is the philosophy of Degrassi. Give it to me, baby. That's it.
I can see that. Good. Anyway, thank you. You've produced a terrific range of wines. They're very good. Okay, all right. Thank you. On these two Muskats may or may not be made from exactly the same family of Muscat. I find that the first one, 37, has got very pure Muscat aromas and flavours. I love the brightness of flavour. It's not, how can I put it? Muscat, there are some sweet wines in the world that are really complex. They're very complex. This, to my mind, is not complex. Muscat does have a certain simplicity to it. And this is really, it's simple, but it's beautifully done. Very pure, very bright, refreshing, sweet, delicious. I think it's really well done. There are other sweet wines that are more complex, and I suspect, I'm sure Croatia can do those too. The second one, 38, to my mind, doesn't quite have the floral character of the aroma, or the grape character on the aroma. And I just feel on the palate, what I loved about 37 was the freshness seemed to be a grape freshness. You know when you're biting into grapes, and there's that lovely freshness of fresh grapes. That's the way it came across to me. With 38, some of the freshness was from, there's a little bit of CO2. It's slightly less natural in its freshness than 37. Okay? Sorry. But that was the way that it came across. For me, it was less intense, suggested, whether or not it is, suggested slightly higher yields or whatever, I'm not sure. But I thought 37 had the purer Muscat character of the two. It's difficult, when you've got two side by side, it's hard not to compare them, so forgive me for doing so. I decided what I'm going to say about these two. I found with both of them, and I'm not sure whether it's the temperature of the wines, with both of them I found them difficult to come to terms with on the nose. The aromatics of both I found just maybe it's because they were unfamiliar, that they just didn't smell like sweet wines I'm used to drinking. But I think maybe it is the temperature, that the aromas aren't coming through quite as expressively as I would like them to. On the palate, both of them are terrific. To drink, both of them are really, really good. They've got great sweetness of flavour. It's lovely to see the contrast in styles. They've got the acidity to balance. They're very high-class sweet wines in totally different styles. I wish I could be a bit more specific about what they remind me of, but maybe it's best not to, just leave it at that. But they're both so different in style, I wouldn't, quality-wise, as far as I'm concerned, they're both very good.
Well, it was a medicine tradition, and only a priest, a mayor, a good godfather could get a sip of it when it comes to your house.
Is that right?
The house that had one bottle was okay, two bottles was almost rich and poor.
If you have got these to show as well, it will certainly reinforce the quality of the operations, of what you're doing. Yep. And I have been spoilt. Yeah. But they are... It's difficult when talking about these because they've got differing levels of residual sugar. The Rhine Riesling is incredibly sweet, to the extent that it tastes like, you know how like an apple sauce, the sort of apple sauce that the English serve with roast pork. It's got the texture of apple sauce. Very, very sweet, good acidity. It's fantastic, but I feel it somehow just needed a tiny bit more acidity to balance the sweetness. But it's really, really good. But it is incredibly sweet. It says on the label 315 grams per litre. That is super sweet. Fortunately, I tried that after the other two, which aren't that sweet. The Chardonnay and Pinot Blanc, I suppose these two, they make really good, they're both ice wines. I'm not sure I can tell that by tasting them, except that neither of them have the complexity that you would get from botrytis. They're both very sweet. They're both very, very good and both very, very clean. I think with this level of sweetness, it's quite difficult to assess grape character or varietal character. I don't think that's what it's about. They're really nicely balanced, and I like both of them. But, and you could sense there was a but coming, but they're not Riesling.
They're not?
Riesling. And top Riesling just has an edge, a bite of acidity that balances the sweetness better than, in my view, those two grapes. They're really, really good sweet wines, and they are world class. I've just been judging for 2 weeks at the International Wine Challenge in London. We tasted a lot of sweet white wines. Certainly these two would have been silver medals. This one, potentially gold, I would imagine. So they are right up there with the very best sweet wines.
There's a little something. Mr. Boris he's not fond of botrytis.
Okay.
He says that botrytis gives the wrong idea of
impression.
Wine.
The wrong impression.
Right.
The wrong impression. That may look.
That's his idea.
That's absolutely fine by me, because if he's making wines like this, I'm happy to listen to him, because he obviously knows what he's doing. I think the Rhine Riesling is potentially the greatest, but I just wonder if, as I say, I'd love to have seen that, and I wish some of you could try it, but somehow with that just a tiny bit of an edge of more acidity, and it would have been about as perfect as wine can get. Because the aromas, sorry, one final thing, which is important for this style of wine, that's really where the Rhine Riesling scores higher than the other two. It's because of the aromatics. Chardonnay and Pinot Blanc have quite slightly dull, more reserved aromatics, whereas the Riesling has the more lifted aromatics, and that's why I would score it higher. That's the main reason. But they're fantastic wines. Just terrific.